Our team several weeks ago reached out to the Trump organization and reached out to the Harris organization, Vice President Harris, President Donald Trump, and offered the ability to sit down and have a discussion about ideas, because I'm sick and tired of all the mudslinging. I'd like to talk about ideas, and because I think ideas are worth fighting over and arguing about. And if you want to sit down and talk about ideas and do a long-form interview, the Harris camp has our request. The last word we got was under.
This is interesting. I'm also curious. I know Dave is a huge figure in the finance space. I actually wouldn't have expected him to try to pull in some conversation with the upcoming presidential candidates, but curious what he would cover here, especially since he mostly focuses kind of in the finance, personal finance, real estate space. What types of topics he was hoping to cover here, but seems like he'll be discussing that soon.
Under review. So not been a yes, not been a no from them, but I flew to New York, and at this time yesterday, I was in Trump Tower interviewing President Donald Trump for an hour. And
Oh, that's actually pretty awesome. So he actually got one of them to reply. Curious if they're going to be able to show the clip here, or they're just going to do sort of like a paraphrasing or a transcript of what was discussed.
35 minutes anyway, ended up being. Went a little quicker than we thought it was going to go. But just to sit down and to talk about ideas and so forth. And it was fun. It was interesting. I've never done anything like that. I've interviewed presidents or past presidents before, but obviously he is a different one, especially in front of a microphone, because he knows microphones and production. He's been on TV for years, and he's very cognizant of what he's doing. It's very interesting. So it was fun. It was very interesting. You get a different thing off of, my contention is this, that anyone that hates someone is just, there's a few people you should hate. Hitler, okay? But he's not Hitler. And there's a few people, if you want to hate him, you can hate him. But I got to tell you, if you dislike someone's positions on things, if you spend an hour with them and just listen to them and find out their heartbeats and that they love their kids, it's hard to be a racist if you spend time with people of a different color. It's hard to be a sexist if you spend time with high-performing people of the opposite sex. It's hard to hate people when you spend time with them. That's my theory. So
I think that's a great point that Dave is bringing up here. While I'm not going to say that I agree with a lot of Trump's perspectives or views on things, I do think it is a good message, generally speaking. I do think that oftentimes, especially in U.S. politics, we do a lot of polarization amongst folks, and I do think all these folks are human beings. At the end of the day, they have families. They're also trying to make a living. Also, to some extent, you just referenced Trump also is familiar with kind of television and broadcasting, and so that is probably also worth taking with a grain of salt. But I do think it's a good message overall of tolerance and acceptance of other folks, and I do think that is a good message to have at this point in time, especially considering elections are coming up, and many times we often polarize the two parties and the individuals who kind of represent those parties or believe in those parties. And do agree that for us to kind of make steps forward, it does require some level of acceptance and willingness to kind of hear others out. And so I do think that was a great message he shouted out, but curious to see what they'll say transpired in that interview.
And that was my attempt at doing this. So it may be boring as crud to some of you. We had a good time with it. Yeah. And I think you'll laugh some, and I think you'll hear some things when the interview comes out that you didn't expect.
That's a little disappointing. Sounds like the interview is actually not going to be described here, or at least the full video itself is going to be released separately. So maybe I'll try to be on the lookout for that video, but curious to see what else he covers here. Maybe he'll give us kind of some insight into what was discussed, or maybe his questions that he led into it. That would be interesting to know before the interview actually gets shared.
But I also don't think there's anything in there that's like breaking news. I don't think Dave Ramsey has got a scoop for sure. We got exactly what he wanted us to get.
Sure.
Because he's a pro. You're not going to get something he didn't want you to get. And they did not ask to review the questions in advance. Actually, an hour before, the social media guy got nervous and said, "Can I see the questions?" But not Trump's staff. The social media guy was worried about what was going to end up on social media because they're very cognizant of the power of social media. So anyway, it's fun. So here's the deal: it will come out on the Ramsey Network app, which is a free download for your phone or your computer, and it will come out Tuesday on the Ramsey Network app. And on Wednesday, we'll put the interview out long form on all of our podcast channels and our YouTube channels. Completely free. All of it's free either way. There's no hook in this. There's nothing else. But it was, yeah, I don't, I mean, I do a lot of stuff behind closed doors and go to high security situations. I've never seen security like this in my life. It was unbelievable.
Well, I saw there was a tweet that went out that was like, Iran's trying to kill me and he'll never get me and I'm surrounded by missiles and whatever, right as whatever tweet was going out.
Well, I mean,
as you were walking in.
Just getting in front of that building, getting into that building, going up an elevator in that building, going into a certain room in that building where the president's going to appear later. It's an interesting process. It's especially with all the crap going on with him in particular. But they are doing their job. That's for sure. It's
well, I want to say this on behalf of I don't have a normal job, right? I'm a YouTuber, as my son says, and a radio host. I don't have a normal job, but on behalf of, like, you say this often, if everything was just to go away, you and Sharon are going to be fine, right? Like if some big economic correction, you and Sharon are going to be fine. You don't owe anybody any money and you've done well. We were in a meeting the other day and I appreciate, as a guy who's just a regular guy. I had to go talk to my neighbor yesterday over something that happened with my dog. I'm trying to figure out how to get my yard mowed before it rains.
You too?
Yes. I'm just as a regular guy living in a neighborhood. In a meeting the other day, you said what you just said. I want to double click on it. I'm sick of everybody just throwing mud at each other. And every day you come to work, you're the only CEO in America that I know of that still spends 3 hours a day with their front end customer, listening to hurting people all day. Like, I want to get some real answers to some real questions. And I want to give both camps an opportunity just to say, okay, here's how I'm actually going to help people with eggs. Here's how I'm going to help people with, like, the cost of it's just hard in life right now.
Yeah, it is.
And so thank you.
Yeah, so it seems like they're kind of hinting at what's going to be covered in this interview a bit here, which is, again, probably those financial matters, which are like, what are they probably going to do about inflation, potentially like the debt for the U.S., how they're going to help folks through some of these trying times that we have. I know we recently reacted to a Ramsey video where they discussed kind of the interest rate cuts that are happening. So that also could be a topic that gets brought up, and how the presidential candidate is interested in impacting that, or the policies that they have around finance in order to help the everyday person. So it does seem like they're at least hinting at some of the topics that they'll be covering in that interview here.
For being somebody who at least wants to say, I'll use my platform to speak up on people who are hurting because I talk to them every day. And y'all apparently don't, because nobody's talking about them, right?
Right.
And so I appreciate you being willing to do that.
Well, it's fun. Yeah, obviously we're catching hell.
Of course. Well, everybody will catch hell for everybody.
All the anti-Trump people are just raining acid on our parade. But that's fine. I mean, this is not an endorsement of anybody. I do not worship. I'm not starstruck. I'm not. It's not because I'm arrogant or something. I've just been doing this crap a long time, and these people are interesting to me, though, because the type of person that plays at that level is very interesting to me. The level of energy that they have. I mean, he's 78 years old. He spoke in North Carolina like 2 hours before he was in Trump Tower in front of our cameras. I mean, he doesn't stop. I mean, where is he getting all this energy? I'd be worn out, and I'm 64. But yeah.
Yeah, I think, again, kind of highlighting some of that polarization that exists. I do think also, again, great shout out on folks who are kind of at the elite level of whatever domain they're in, whether it's politics or finance, engineering, whatever domain it is. I do think that those folks are certainly an interesting individual to have an interview with. I think, obviously, we think a lot about some of these folks already, like the folks who are executives of the top companies like a Jeff Bezos or an Elon Musk. These folks are definitely interesting to the everyday individual to see what these people are like. What does it take to be kind of at the top of your domain, and how does that impact their lifestyle? How different are they from the everyday person like ourselves? And so I do agree with that point. I do think it would be interesting regardless of people's views. Um, if you're operating at that level, you at least likely have to have some some level of skill set, aspirations, dedication. Those things don't just really fall into folks' laps. While certainly some of these things are easier to get for other folks, especially wealthy folks, like in Donald Trump's case. Um, Certainly, not every wealthy person has just become a presidential candidate. So there must be something that is unique about Trump, or unique about other presidential candidates or other folks who are kind of operating at this top tier level. So I do agree with that sentiment. I do think it is interesting to learn from folks and understand their different perspectives and maybe what you could take away for your own life and how you could maybe emulate certain characteristics, even though you don't necessarily need to be a carbon copy of that individual or agree with all of their views. I do think it's great to try to learn from folks who, especially, have a number of years behind them. They have a lot of experience and they're excelling in some area. Usually means that they have put time and effort into getting to where they are. Um, Even if that time and effort and skill is not equivalent for every individual, I think certainly you can assume that folks who have made it to the top have at least some baseline level of those things. So curious to see what else they share about this interview.
And he's shorter than I thought he was. I thought the guy was massive, didn't you? You have the impression that he's like 6'6" or something. He's not.
No?
He's just a little bit taller than me.
Than you?
Than me.
And you're just a little bit taller than George Canton. You're way taller. than
Yeah,
George.
careful.
You're way
careful.
taller.
Everybody's taller than George Campbell. But yeah, I mean, it was interesting. That kind of stuff is interesting to me. So our first question, I'll go ahead and preview it. I just said, okay, Mr. President, we talk to real people every day.
I do also enjoy, speaking of kind of skills, like Dave and this show, how they're able to cover in depth topics, how eloquent he is, his ability to also kind of transition from these serious topics to kind of this banter that he has had with the various co-hosts he has on this show, I think certainly is impressive, and definitely have a lot of respect for Dave.
Let me tell you what they're concerned about. They're not concerned about a bunch of the stuff you're talking about. The stuff they're concerned about, $7 eggs, $5 gas, 7% interest rates, and house prices going up faster than their wages are going up. This black cloud that's over our economic situation right now. And we can talk about how it got there. We can talk about what you used to do. You can talk about the current administration, but I don't really want to. What I want to talk about is what you're going to do in the first 90 days to get this black cloud off of America.
Right.
And that was my first question. Yeah. So, and I'll ask Vice President Harris this exact same question if I get the opportunity.
Yeah.
So,
and I think it's all couched with, we're still going to show up and tell Americans, you can't wait on them.
Yeah.
Like, you got to control what's in your house.
And by the way, if you're out there and you're angry and you're never going to deal with Ramsey again because I interviewed Donald Trump, good. Leave. I'm fine with that. You're narrow-minded and too stupid to talk to. You need to learn to engage ideas and engage things that make you uncomfortable. So good. If you're angry because I might talk to Vice President Harris and you're going to leave and never listen to us again, good. See ya. Wouldn't want to be you. We'll miss you. Brought to you by the Ramsey Network app. Download today to go further with Ramsey.
Yeah, so he kind of ends on sort of this tough stance for folks and the viewership. I think Dave classically has these tough love segments. But I'm definitely interested to see. A little disappointed they didn't show any clips or anything of the interview itself in this, I guess, teaser of it. I'll definitely be on the lookout for that interview to review and react to. And I'm also interested to see if Kamala Harris and the Democratic Party actually eventually reach out to Dave and do a follow-up. That would be interesting to see kind of how presumably Dave would take the same questions and Kamala would respond to them. But it's also probably at this point no surprise that Dave is, at least my assumption is that he's more conservative and he generally represents the Republican Party. And so it does make sense to me that the Trump group would have been more open to a discussion with Dave, assuming that he's going to be on friendlier terms with them just out of the gate from his political leanings. So there's no guarantee that Kamala Harris would ever reply, but definitely looking forward to that interview. And thank you for watching. And if you like what you saw, please hit like or subscribe. I'll see you around.